calls. Today I think Spirit is moving and calling and asking one powerful question, kind of a long one. Is there anything lifeless, dull, or boring in your life? Now, not your spouse or partner. We're talking about you. Anything lifeless, dull, or boring in your life? Yeah. In Unity, we do not have a lot of rituals, but what we do have are powerful, purposeful, and packed into this time of year. We have the Christmas Eve candlelighting service. We have what we experienced last week, the burning bowl, and our letter of intention, and we have a white stone ceremony today. All of those are centered around the belief, the truth, the knowing that we are meant to have a life that's filled with purpose. And so, if we're finding ourselves in a place where we feel lifeless, dull, or boring, this is the time to be with that question and to be with the truth that that's not what we're created to experience. As a year to do greater things. The idea was sparked by this book, and this book is based on a class that Robin and Giselle will be teaching. And this book is based on the scripture where we recorded that Jesus said, the things that he did, he said, very truly I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact, greater things than these. You see, in Unity, we recognize that Jesus was a human being. And as a human being, he actualized his potential as a Christed being or an enlightened being. And what he did not ask us to worship him. He did not tell us that he was the one and only. What he said was, follow me, meaning follow suit, do the same thing. And so we see Jesus in a very different light than most of Christianity. And we see ourselves as being equal creations of God. That you are a child or a creation of the Creator, and that we too really are intended to do greater things. So when we think about in our life what is lifeless, dull, or boring, one of the first things we consider is, are we creating our life with intention, with direction? Are we designing our life, or is our life a life of default? Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, said, states of mind make events, and new states of mind are constantly being formed. Consequently, every moment is the new beginning of a new creation to the individual. That in every moment we have the capacity to create something new. But as Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you will wind up somewhere else. And so until we know where we're going and we become deliberate about that, we're going to wind up somewhere else. And I call that default living. We're either living by design, directing our life energy, or we're living a life of default. Now, you know what the default setting is on your computer? The default setting is what you get if you don't automatically set something else. It's just what's there until you insert something else. But another definition of default is loss by not showing up, such as they lost the game by default. And so when we think about living in default mode, it is the loss that we experience because we don't show up. So how do we show up? How do we become deliberate with our life? I was guided today to share with us, to draw several principles that came to me from the story that we're given in Luke of Jesus' first miracle. And many of you probably know that. Who knows it? Does anybody know what Jesus' first miracle was? Water into wine. That's a good one, water into wine. I don't know of any of us that can accomplish that. And so we're going to look for the metaphysical, the symbolic meaning, but let's take a look at the story. In this story, we have a wedding feast, and we're told that Jesus and a bunch of his disciple friends were there, and his mother were at this wedding. Now, in their culture, a wedding was not like a wedding today. And as a matter of fact, in the Middle East, weddings are still very much like a wedding is typically 3 to 7 days long. It's a huge celebration. So they were a part of this wedding feast, this wedding celebration, we're told in the Gospel of Luke. And where the story picks up, Mary notices that all of the wine has run out. Now, the tradition was that when you had a huge wedding feast, you can imagine what would be involved in feeding people and providing wine for folks for several days or a week. So they gave the best wine first. It makes sense, because if people have been drinking wine for 2 or 3 days, after a while, they're not going to know if now you're pulling out the cheap stuff, So the good stuff ran out, the cheap stuff ran out, everything ran out. And Mary says, "Jesus, we have no wine." And what is really fascinating is Jesus started whining. Have any of you ever whined? I have a good friend who's an art teacher. She teaches art to students that are kindergarten through 5th grade, and she has one little student who's a chronic whiner. And so he was whining so badly in class that day, he had to go back to his homeroom teacher, and finally he was brought back in to apologize, and the teacher's name is, I'll say Miss Smith. They said, "Now apologize for your whining." And he said, "I'm sorry, I was whining." We all have that within us, sometimes to just whine. And I love it that Jesus whined. Like Reverend Sherry said, if you fall down greatly. If you get up, if you're going to whine, just whine greatly and then get over it. That whatever we do, there's the capacity to eventually infuse greatness into it. Well, specifically what he said was, after not wanting to be involved, when his mother came to him, he said, "Woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come." Woman, dear woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come. He was not ready to step into his greatness. He was not yet quite ready to own the truth of who he was. And so his mother did what any good mother would do. She ignored him. She went over to the servants and said, "Come here. Do whatever he tells you to do." And she essentially put him on the spot. So at that point, he called for the empty barrels to be filled with water. And the scripture says he then blessed and turned the water into wine. And all those who were there were mystified at what had happened. And they realized that the wine that they were now able to draw out was the best wine that they ever experienced. So there's 5 things, 5 really important things that we can take away from this as we begin this year of a year of doing greater things. And when we drop that against the backdrop of constantly asking ourselves, what in me is lifeless, dull, or boring? Now, the first thing that we take out of this is when he asked that the barrels be filled with water, it is a symbol of our capacity to fill ourselves with Spirit. You see, when Jesus said, dear woman or mother, what does this have to do with me? My time has not come. He probably had those same voices in his head that we have that says, you're not good enough, you're not ready, you're going to embarrass yourself. What are you going to do? Anyone else have those voices? Anybody else sometimes find yourself full of that stuff? You're full of it. Well, as long as we're filled with that, we do not have the space to be filled with the Spirit of greatness, the Spirit of our Godness. And yet it is we and we alone that we have the capacity to empty that and to fill ourselves with something greater. The first thing we remember to do is to fill ourselves with Spirit. Every day, practice those things that we absolutely know: prayer, meditation, contemplation, reading sacred things, having conversations that are helpful and supportive and enlightening, doing those basic fundamental things to fill ourselves with that Spirit.